Hello and welcome to the ConnectWise Automate virtual training series. Today's subject is monitoring with Ignite. We are going to discuss the onboarding process as well as the types of monitors that are in the Automate product. The alert templates, basically the actions that are going to occur when your monitors trigger, and how we're going to kind of set all those up in conjunction with each other. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is initiate the process. We're going to come out to the location. We're going to recommend that you do this on a location by location basis. And that's because you're going to get a lot of ticket noise when you initially go through the onboarding process. We have a lot of tickets that are kind of noisy out of the gate. And you're going to want to take the time to really fine tune these monitors and quiet them down before you bring the rest of your environments on. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a very, very high ticket volume, and that can be difficult to kind of parse through. So what you're going to do is you're going to double click on the location, and then you're going to come to the Ignite tab. You should default to the Services subtab, and you're going to notice that there are some service plan selections here. You've got this drop down for servers and one for workstations. If I hit the drop down here, we've got a number of selections. Let's go ahead and discuss those options. So the very first one that we have there is not really a valid selection. Not selected basically means you really have to choose something here, even if it's just none. None simply means that there are no service plans applied. Okay. The managed 8x5 has a wide variety of monitoring with some auto remediation. It does have some non-business critical monitors, but they're only going to alert between the hours of 8 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon. Now, by contrast, Managed 24/7 is going to have a wide variety of, the same kind of monitors and auto remediation, but those non-business critical monitors are going to alert 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A very similar plan to that is Managed HAAS. This one's only found for our workstation service plans, but basically, the difference is HAAS stands for Hardware as a Service, and it basically has a couple of alert template changes for software monitors specific to workstation environments. We have our AV only and backup only. Those are exactly what they sound like they would be. They are monitors that pertain to those particular pieces of your environments. Here's a combo of those two types of monitors. And then finally, no contract. This has got a wide variety of monitors associated with it, but there's no auto remediation here. This is intended for your break-fix clients. Or alternately, you may want to use this for your prospects to kind of showcase the services you're capable of providing to them. Now, typically, most partners will choose server service plan as Managed 24/7 and Workstation Managed 8x5. We're going to make that selection, and we're going to go ahead and save additional information. And just to kind of help put some perspective into what exactly it means when you're selecting these drop-downs. What does that mean? Well, if we come out to groups, notice that I have service plan groups. And anything in this middle kind of gray strip here, these are always containers of some sort. Okay, in this instance, these are our containers, our groups. And I'm going to expand the service plan group and look at the subgroups here, get us some real estate. We've got workstation servers and we've got Windows workstations. Notice that the names of these subgroups here correspond to the names of the service plans. In fact, if I hit this drop down, you're going to see that it's basically the same thing, right? That's pretty much what you're doing when you're selecting these drop downs. You're choosing which of these groups in this hierarchy these endpoints are going to end up in, and what that entails when you do that is what monitors it's going to get. So if I double click on that group and I go to computers, there I can see as one of my sub tabs, because I'm choosing computers because we are dealing with monitoring computers in this instance. I can go to my internal monitors and my remote monitors subtabs, and they're populated, right? I've got things enabled with alert templates. Again, alert templates are a collection of actions that are going to occur when the conditions of your monitor are met. It's what's going to happen when the monitor triggers. Now, these remote monitors are always available on all of your groups. So, for example, if I minimize that and I double click on the All Agents group, As another example, I'm going to go to the same spot. I'm going to go to computers, internal monitors. I can see that these monitors are present, but very few enabled and very, very simple basic things enabled on this, right? There's not a lot here. If I go to my remote monitors, there's only 2. Okay, these are not really service plans, these other groups. That's what the difference is. These service plans, it's all pre-configured based on industry standard best practices. Okay, that's really what Ignite is. Okay, when we go back to our location, we're calling Ignite. We're calling it that because it's all of these monitors and automation and groups and scripts and all of these things that we've built into the system by default that are based on industry standard best practices. This is what that looks like inside of our environment. Okay, now we're going to get into the differences between these monitor types and how to configure them here in just a little bit. But for right now, just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. When you're applying these service plan groups, that's what you're doing. You're getting them into these pre-configured groups for you. The next thing that you're going to enable to do is enable onboarding. And essentially what this is going to do is it's going to kick off what we call our onboarding process. And we do deviate just a little bit from industry standards here in that normally onboarding entails getting an agent onto an endpoint, having that agent check into its management console or server, and hey, you're onboarded. But with us, there's a little bit more to it than that. We have some processes that we like to have performed on our endpoints to really kind of prepare them for our environment. Let's go ahead and explore what that means. Once I enable onboarding and I save that additional information, I'm initiating an entire process, which, by the way, is an example of an automation. The next virtual training series that we have is going to be on the subject of automation. I'd like to plant the seed right now that this really is an example of an automation. We're using the same elements, right? A group to kind of tie everything together and to execute things against, a script to perform our actions, a search to automatically get those agents into that group, and then some extra data fields, some EDFs as we call them, to kind of manipulate that data and manipulate the automation to our advantage. We're going to explore all of those in the automation session in detail, but it really is, the onboarding process truly is an example of that. These enable onboardings, these are extra data fields we've just enabled to initiate this entire automatic process. Let's go explore that process now. We're going to go ahead and close our location object there. And what we've done is initiate a process whereby those endpoints are going to end up in this onboarding group here. Okay. If I double click on that onboarding group, I have auto join searches over here in the top right. That is the mechanism that is allowing this to happen. It's one of the 4 pieces of your automation. It's a search. And what it does is it goes out and it looks for some very specific criteria. Okay, in this instance, it's looking for 2 criteria, and they both have to be true. That's what it means by and here. Now, if it was an or, it might be one or the other of these can be true to meet the criteria of the search. But when you're using and, it says, yeah, I really want both of these to be the criteria that I'm using. I'm going to do just a little bit of cleanup here, folks. We want to keep that one open. We're going to close our service plan. And what I'd like to do is go back out to clients here. I want to open up the location object and go back to my Ignite tab. Okay. And then I'm going to open up a computer management screen. And because we consider Ignite a plugin, I'm going to right click in my plugin workspace and I'm going to go down to Ignite. Notice we have an onboarding complete checkbox there. And there's no check in that checkbox. It's good. We're going to leave it just like that. Let's go back to our search. Our search is saying I have 2 criteria that are important to me to get you into this group. First, we have computer.location. That is always a reference to the location object. Okay, so if I pull this location object up, that's what this is talking about. It says, hey, at the location level, look for an extra data field.default. Extra data field.default is always a reference to Ignite. Okay, so basically you could read this line to say, at the location properties window, look in the Ignite tab. See if there's an extra data field called Enable Onboarding and make sure that it's true. In other words, I want to see that this extra data field called Enable Onboarding has a check in the checkbox. My second criteria reads a little differently. It says computer dot, and then it goes right into the extra data field .default. Well, we know extra data field .default is a reference to Ignite. So that computer dot with nothing after it is really just an indication of the computer management screen itself. So I'm going to minimize my location object, and I'm going to bring up my computer management screen. There it is. So on the computer management screen, on the Ignite tab, look for an extra data field called Onboarding Complete, and make sure it's false. Make sure that there is no check in the Onboarding Complete extra data field checkbox. So right now, this endpoint meets the criteria for the search, and you can see these search results in the window right here below the search itself. And you can see that it has identified the 3 systems that I have in my location. Let's see what that looks like. There they are. What's going to happen now is a process that basically runs off of a schedule. So if we come over to computers, again, because we're going on and dealing with computers here, we're going to go to scheduled scripts. Remember, the script is the part of the automation that's going to perform our action for us. So now that we've gotten these agents into this group, we need to execute this script against them. Okay? And as you can see, we've scheduled this script, the onboarding script, to run about once every hour. In other words, once every hour, this onboarding script is going to run against any endpoints that are a member of this group. Well, that's both good and bad. It's good because when we get these agents into this group, we want them to run this script. We want them to go through the onboarding process. But once they've gone through that process, we really don't want them to stay in this group anymore. We don't want that onboarding script running against those endpoints continuously. So we're going to go back out to the main tab here, and I want to reference limit to search. And what that does is a mechanism that will force the criteria of the search to remain for the endpoint in order to stay inside the group. In other words, this group is going to refresh its membership every 30 minutes. That's 24 minutes for the refresh to occur, and about 6 minutes after that for the dust to settle and for membership to kind of be applied to your endpoints. So it's about a half-hour round trip for those agents. Every half hour that search occurs. And if limit to search is checked, it's going to say, hey, look, do you still meet the criteria of the search that got you into this group? Do you still meet this criteria here? If the answer to that is yes, it's going to allow you to stay in the group. If the answer to that is no, limit to search is going to boot you out of the group because you no longer meet the criteria of the search. That's really important for our automation and for making sure that the onboarding script does not run continuously over and over again on these endpoints. So the obvious question becomes, okay, well, how are we going to accomplish that? Well, remember, the script is where we're performing our actions. And that is going to be true of manipulation of this extra data field as well. We want to manipulate this extra data field to have a check in that checkbox. And we're going to be able to utilize our script to do that. Let's go ahead and click on Automation. We're going to go down to Scripts and View Scripts. Inside of my containers area here, I'm going to expand the System Automation container, and I'm going to highlight the onboarding container to see the onboarding scripts listed on the right. Let's double click on this onboarding script and take a look at what we're doing here. The first thing of consequence that we're doing is we're going to call another script. This is a process that we call nesting. In other words, you can have scripts call other scripts and run them. You can do that really kind of as many times as you want to. And what's really convenient about that is you can utilize that process to have a single script kick off multiple functions that you're going to do. And that's exactly what we've done here. This initial system configuration -system is a script that does some basic configuration processes on your endpoints that prepare them for monitoring in our environment. But what's really cool is the initial system configuration -partner. That's really neat because what that does is allow you, the partner, to configure your own process to occur prior to the rest of the onboarding process happening. Let's double click on that script. You can see that's the initial software install partner. And there's nothing really in here. Okay, that's actually the software one. I wanted this one right here, initial system configuration, but there's a little foreshadowing of some of the other areas we're going to see in that onboarding script. But right now, this initial system configuration -partner, you can see that there's nothing here. This is for you to use however you need. It's a blank template. Okay, whatever process you may need to occur during the onboarding process, that's there for you. Server role detection is next, and this is a really important process for us. We have a number of monitors that are going to base themselves off of the roles that we detect on your endpoint. So if your server is in Active Directory server, is it running the infrastructure master role? Is it a DHCP or DNS server? Is it an SQL box or an Exchange box? Things of that nature are important for monitoring. We want to make sure that we're watching for the proper things in your environment. So server role detection is a major part of that. Windows Update Setup. The first thing I like to start with when mentioning this piece is no, we are not running Windows Update on your endpoints. That's not what this is. What this is going to do is very simple. It looks at the Windows Update executable on the endpoint, and it tries to determine if that executable is the most current version of that executable for the environment or for the operating system. And that's a simple yes/no question. If the answer to that question is yes, great. It's going to go out and move right along. But if the answer to that question is no, it's going to try to download that most current version from Microsoft and update it on the endpoint. The reason that we care about that is tied to our patch management system. The patch management system utilizes existing Windows Update technology, so we like to make sure that the Windows Update agent itself is as current as possible on your endpoints to prepare it for the best chance of success in our patch management system. The next thing we're going to do is an initial software install, and this is, again, I kind of clicked on the wrong script for a moment there to kind of foreshadow this one, but you get the idea. This is the same concept that we saw with the initial system configuration. We have a -system. What that's doing is just kind of putting a couple of applications, very minor applications, in place on the endpoint that are, again, tied to making sure that our monitoring system is going to be able to function on your endpoint. But the real fun piece here is the initial software install -partner. Just like you saw when I kind of opened up this one initially, as well as the initial system configuration one, it's the same concept here. It's a blank script for you to use however you need. Maybe you have antivirus software or backup software, or a file cleaning utility that you want to install. Maybe you have your own custom utility that you've built yourself and that you want to make sure that you put out on your endpoints. Whatever the case, if you can script it, you can call that script from right inside of here, built in for you. The next thing that we're going to do is we are going to have some monitors get created on your endpoint. These are very, very minor monitors. They are tied to drive space and things of that nature. There's only a handful of them. But what's really important here is to note that in 45 minutes. The reason that that's going to happen is tied to our schedules. Remember, if we go back to the group, the thing that's kind of tying all of this automation together, this group, we're going to come back to main here, and we're going to remember that our group refresh rate is every 30 minutes, and our scheduled script is set to run once an hour. So when we are running this script, what we don't want to happen is to have the agent still trying to install these monitors and get through that process before the next scheduled run of the onboarding script is set to occur. In other words, we want this to catch the next possible group refresh to get itself out of that group before the onboarding script gets queued up to run against it again. So we're going to delay the installation of those monitors for about 45 minutes so that we can move on to the very next script step, where we are going to manipulate that extra data field that we talked about on the computer management screen. There it is, onboarding complete. Let's get ourselves some real estate. Okay. The very last thing that we're doing here, set extra data field onboarding complete equals 1. That means we are going to put a check in this checkbox. Okay. That's what the last thing that script is going to do is say, hey, on the computer management screen, go to the Ignite tab, find the onboarding complete extra data field, and put a check in that checkbox. Script's going to do that for us automatically. I don't need to and should not manually do that myself. Okay. Once that happens, remember what our search says. Our search says, wait a second. If on the computer management screen on the Ignite tab, the onboarding complete checkbox has to be false, meaning there's no check. If it's true, you don't meet the criteria for the search. Limit to search is going to boot you out of the search before that onboarding script has a chance to run again. Now that we have all of these monitors applied, what exactly does that mean? What are these monitors? What are they going to do for us? Default landing page here for the control center. I'm going to click on automation. I'm going to go to monitors. And we're going to click on internal monitors. In general, we have two different types of monitors inside of Automate. We have internal monitors and we have remote monitors. And there are some pretty key differences between those two types. Internal monitors are simply SQL queries that are going to run against our database. That's it. It's just an SQL query that's going to look at our database. It's basically just looking for a failure state in its configuration against the information in that database. By contrast, our remote monitors are a little bit different. Those are more like applications that reside on your endpoints themselves. And they don't really care about the database. They're as close to real time as Automate's going to get. And what they do is they are running on either group configurations or individual agent configurations. You can do it either way, but they're looking for a successful state or range to stay in their configuration. Okay, so it's a little bit of kind of a juxtaposed logic, a reverse logic, if you will, from how your internal monitors work. We're going to start by examining our internal monitors. And I like to work with drive space remaining less than 10%. So we're going to double click on this. Now, this status tab is pretty obvious, right? This is just simply the results from the most recent run of the monitor. Okay. But the configuration tab is really where most of what we're going to be doing is happening with this internal monitor. First, we've got the name of it. And what you're going to notice here, if I hop back out to monitors for just a moment, you're going to notice for all of these, we kind of use a naming convention for these monitors, right? What we're doing there is basically we're saying, okay, for our default monitors, we're going to use an abbreviation or a word at the beginning of that name that's going to indicate the type of data that's being checked by the monitor. And then the second part is going to be the failure condition the monitor is looking for, or perhaps the item that it's being checked. Okay, so it's going to be very obvious at a glance at that name what it is that this thing is supposed to do. And that's one of the reasons I like this example, is you can see kind of exactly that kind of format here. Next, we have our interval and next runtime. We can see that that's basically setting a time frame there, and then an interval. How often is this monitor going to run? Well, when you're making this selection, it's really important to keep in mind schedules. Now, what I mean by that, we're going to go back out to our navigation tree for just a moment. I'm going to click on automation. I'm going to come down to schedules. There we are. And you're going to see we have this divided up by platforms. I'm just going to double click on desktops here. And what you're looking at are different pieces of information about your agents, your endpoints, that are going to get updated in the Automate database based on these dates and timeframes, these days and timeframes here, and number of occurrences per hour. As you can see, these are different, one from the other, and they're going to be different for each of these different platforms as well. And it's important to take that into consideration when you are choosing your interval and runtime. Okay? In other words, it's not going to do me any good to choose to run something every 4 hours. If I was looking at software inventory, for example, if this is a software inventory monitor, I wanted to look at something in software, well, software inventory is scheduled to update only once every day. It's going to repeat 0 hours at 6 p.m. Once a day at 6 p.m. is when the software is going to get updated for this endpoint. So checking every 4 hours to see if there's a change is not going to help me, right? You don't want to really kind of use your system resources like that. So you want to make sure that you are checking and setting this interval according to when those schedules are going to coincide with the data that you're looking for. The next thing that we have to explore here is the monitor mode and duplicate alert frequency. And we've got this strange verbiage here, send fail after success. So basically what that means is send fail after success says, okay, when the conditions of the monitor are met, I'm only going to alert once. Okay? After that, whenever the monitor runs based on this interval, if I'm still in a failed state, I'm not going to call that alert template again. The alert template is, once more, it's a collection of actions that will occur when the conditions of the monitor are met. In other words, what's going to happen when this monitor triggers. I'm only going to do that once for that first initial failure. And every time it fails after that, I'm just going to kind of wait until eventually I go back to a successful state. When I go back to a successful state and I'm no longer failed, I'm going to alert you about that. And I'm going to automatically close any ticket or alert that you have associated with it. Now, that's very convenient, but there may be times when you need to have the alert template called, when you need that action to occur every single time the monitor detects a failed state. So you're going to hit this drop down and you're going to notice I have a wide variety of what I call the once pers. Okay, there's any number of different iterations of that. But basically what it means is every single time this monitor runs, if it's in a failed state, it's going to call the alert template. That's basically what it means. Every single time the monitor is in a failed state, it's going to trigger and call that alert template every time. Now, by default, we're going to use send fail after success. The reason for that is the automatic ticket and alert closing, because the once pers will not do that for you. They're not going to automatically close any tickets. They're just going to alert every single time they fail, period. So most of the time, for a lot of the default stuff, you're going to be using send fail after success, or we will have configured it that way ourselves. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to check the specify the check conditions. We want to see what table do I have to look at. Within that table, what field do I need to reference? What is my check condition? In this case, it's a less than, right? Less than, what is my result? What is it I'm looking for? Percent of the drive size. And how am I identifying that? Well, we're going to be identifying that by a drive letter. But the real crux of what we are doing inside of the configuration tab occurs right here in the additional conditions. You want to think of this as your filter. This is where you're getting to the granular data within the database. Okay? And this is in SQL query format. So the first thing that you want to do, if you're like me and you're not really overly familiar with SQL query formats and how to craft them, you can still kind of break down what these are doing if you kind of take them in small chunks like this. So this one says, look, I want the drive size to be greater than this value. That should be a value in megabytes there. And as an additional condition, I want the drive's file system to not be one of these following ones. In other words, hey, I want this to be NTFS. And as a third condition, that drive can't be missing. I really don't care to alert on your thumb drive that you have plugged in, every once in a while. I really only care about your main system drives that don't get taken out. I want to make sure that those are the ones that I alert on when their drive space gets to less than 10% of their total size. Now that we have defined what it is that we're looking for, the next thing we need to do is define where it is we're looking for it. That's what the Monitor Target tab is all about, and I have a couple of different ways that I can go about doing that. I have these drop-downs here where I can specify the client location and computer name. Note that I have to specify from the drop-down above before the ones below will get active, so I have to come in here and make a selection before I'll be able to choose a location. More often than not, though, you're going to use this group white space. You can see there are already some selections in here, and you'll probably notice that some of those are our service plans. Sure. That's what this means. When we enable those on those service plans, we're going to see these show up in this monitor target here because it's active. This internal monitor is active on that particular group. Now, if I wanted to activate this monitor on another group, I could do it from inside of the group level there by double-clicking on one of those internal monitors, or from right inside the monitor's properties window here in the Monitor Target tab, I can just right-click in this group's white space here and choose any group I want. There it is. Now, if I want to get rid of that, I simply double click it and it goes away. So I've specified what it is I'm looking for. I've specified where it is I'm looking for it. Now I need to specify what it is that I'm going to do when I actually find it. That's what alerting and our alert templates are all about. So we have an alerting tab, and then we have our alert templates. And a number of times I've kind of repeated the same phrase over and over again, that alert templates are a collection of actions that are going to occur when the conditions of your monitor are met. They're what's going to happen when the monitor triggers. Okay? That's because it is different from your alerting tab. And it's also important to understand that those alert templates are actually global. So I can have different alert templates set on different groups for the same monitor. But if I make a change to an alert template, that's going to apply everywhere that that alert template is applied in my system. Very important to understand that nuance. Let's go take a look at those alert templates. We're going to go to System, Configuration, Dashboard. I'm going to go to Management, and then Alert Templates on the far right subtab. Up in this top section here are the out-of-the-box default alert templates that I've got. Now, if I come down here we are back in the monitor. I have this drop-down with Edit Alerts and Create a new alert template. About 99% of the time, you have the ability to hit a drop-down and select Alert Template. You're going to be able to edit the alert template you have selected or create a brand new one. And all that means when you create a new one, you're creating it, it's going to show up in here, up in this dashboard, okay? But I have the ability to do that here, and if I hit that drop down, I can see there's a lot of my same ones. There's my Create Automate Ticket, Default Do Nothing, and all the other ones. All right? Create Automate Ticket, Do Nothing, there they are. And notice when I highlight these in here, the Do Nothing one has nothing. That's because it's exactly what it sounds like it would be. It says, look, I see that you've triggered, but don't do anything. Take no action. Now, by contrast, I have an alert template that has an item in there. Let's say I wanted to create my own, though. Let's go ahead and create one. I'm going to click on New Template here, and I'm just going to make this a nice, quick, simple, easy one. I could add some alerts here if I wanted to, but I'm going to go ahead and hit Save and Close. And I can now scroll down inside of here, and there's the alert template I just created. And again, it's just a blank template. There's nothing in there yet. I can click on the New Alert button, or I can right-click inside of here and choose New Alert. And it's going to open up this Alert Item Settings window. And this is really where I'm defining what actions are going to occur. So the first thing you may notice is that there is a warning checkbox and an error checkbox for all of these different actions that you can cause to occur. Okay? That is in reference to what we call state-based monitoring. Now, I do not have any out-of-the-box state-based monitors for you, unfortunately, but what it is it allows you the ability to have different actions occur based on different thresholds. In other words, I can have an email occur at my warning threshold and a ticket generated at my error threshold. Now, again, I don't have any out-of-the-box state-based monitors for you. If you're interested in creating your own state-based monitors, I recommend very highly that you go to our ConnectWise University and look at the documentation pertaining to it to get a deep dive on the subject. When you're not using state-based monitors, you're always going to be using the error column. And if I come down here and I take a look, I can see a number of actions that I can take. I can have an email sent. Perhaps I want a ticket created. Or I can have a script created. Now note down here we have a grayed out drop-down box. Okay, keep an eye on that drop-down box. I'm going to put a check in the script checkbox under the error column, and now that activates this grayed out drop box. If I click on that drop box, I go right to my list of scripts where I have the ability to choose from any of the scripts I have in my instance, even including ones that I have created myself. There are very few exceptions that may not appear in here, system-based scripts, but other than that, you're going to have access to everything, including your custom items. What's neat is I don't have to actually select a script to run there either. I can simply say, yeah, I'm going to want to call a script, and I'll be able to specify on my actual internal monitor that I want a script to run. And I'll show you that here in just a moment. Next, I need to finish configuring the rest of the monitor. I have to choose when I would want this template to be available. I don't know why you would ever want to skip some days of the week, but you certainly have the option to do so if you need to. You want to set a start time and an end time. Okay, there is a little bit of a caveat to these start and end times. You cannot span midnight. In other words, I can't have a start time of 11 p.m. and an end time of 1 a.m. I have to have two different alert items created for that instance, one with a start time of 11 p.m. and an end time of 11:59 p.m. The second item with a start time of 12 a.m. and an end time of 1 a.m. You cannot span midnight between the start and end times of an alert action. I can fill in an alert message on success or failure. And then I have to specify either a contact or an automate user. In this instance, I'm going to choose contact, and I'm going to use the default alerts monitor. I'm going to save my alert action, and my alert template now has an action associated with it that will occur when it gets called. Back to our internal monitor on the alerting tab. Here's our dropdown. Now, if I want to populate this, I probably have to close and reopen this. Yes, I do. Let's see if I can get it to show for us. Continue without saving. Yes. And there it is. Now, when you have these monitors enabled on all these different groups, each one of these groups can have a different alert template assigned to it. So you can have different actions occur for the same monitor based on group membership. That's why it's important to make sure you understand what you're choosing when you're selecting your service plan groups. With regards to your monitor targets, there is one other item that I do need to mention, and that's a little bit of contrary logic here. You would think that if there were no items selected inside of the drop-downs and no groups selected here, that would disable the monitor, but that is not true. What that actually does is make it a global monitor. In other words, it is going to look at absolutely all of your endpoints. Another way I could accomplish that would be to have nothing in these drop-downs, have nothing but the all agents group inside of groups here. The reason that's important to alerting is because you're selecting the alert template here. This is what's going to happen if this monitor is global. That's why we're going to consider it to be a best practice to leave these at default do nothing and to use the alert and assign your alert templates on the group level. The next thing we have on the alert tab are the alert subjects on success and failure. Now, while you have the ability to come in here and customize these, I actually don't recommend that you do so. The reason for that is tied to our configuration and the send fail after success mechanism. Remember, we said that this is how it's going to automatically close the ticket or alert. That is directly tied to these subjects. They've got to be syntax exact. And when I was in the support department, I saw instances where even when these were syntax exact, but they were customized, it broke that functionality. Now, I don't believe that that's still the case. I believe that that was fixed probably quite some time ago at this point. But I would still, as a best practice, really not do that. I would just not put anything in there. There's another advantage to that as well, and that's that these are going to actually auto-populate. Those subjects will auto-populate with information from the monitor itself that's giving you kind of pertinent details to the problem you need to investigate. So it's usually in your best interest to just let that auto-populate. It's going to not only make sure that auto-close mechanism with send fail after success works, it's going to provide you with valuable information for troubleshooting your issue. We have our ticket categories. Now, if you're using a PSA such as ConnectWise Manage, ticket categories are how we are mapping those tickets from Automate over to the service boards in your PSA software. So you're going to want to make sure that when you set these, it's going to be according to whatever service board you have set up in your PSA. You want to match that as accurately as you can. When we were talking about alert templates, I had mentioned that you can have a script be called, but not have to specify in the alert template itself what script that's going to be. If I want to specify that on the monitor level, I'm going to use the script to run box to do that. And that's the same thing here. I'm going to hit the drop down and have access to all of the scripts, or the vast majority of the scripts in my environment, including your custom scripts. Next, I have a report category, and this is typically going to be auto-populated. And that's tied into our Report Center plugin, and all of the reports, obviously, it would be generated from that. As a best practice, I would leave that with its pre-selected item. Now, from time to time, you are going to need to make exclusions for endpoints. You're going to have to say, look, whatever my reason is, I do not want Automate this specific monitor looking at this endpoint for whatever the reason is. It doesn't matter. You're going to come over here to the Exclusions tab. You're going to right-click in the Disabled Computers workspace. You're going to drill down to the client, the location, and then the endpoint. And you save that change. That's going to close the monitor, and it's going to make sure that that remains inside of the Disabled Computers white space there. At this point, that monitor is no longer going to be watching this agent. I also have another flavor of that, if you will. It's a script disable, and it's going to work the same way. I'm going to right-click in the white space. I'm going to go down to my client, my location, my endpoint. The difference here, however, is that the monitor will still run on the agent, but if there is a script associated with the monitor or a alert template that calls a script, it's going to prevent that script from running on the endpoint. Now, if I change my mind later and I want to get rid of them, I simply double-click on the item in the white space, and it'll go away. Next, I have the History tab. This is a very handy tab when you're doing some detective work. If you're trying to see if you have a trending issue in your environment, the History tab is a very convenient way to kind of help outline things like that. You're going to get an event date that's going to include a timestamp, the agent name, the type, the result, and the alert message, which often includes some clues for you as well. But most importantly, this is going to be for all of the results of this monitor. It's not tied to a specific client or location. And that's what makes it easy to see with trending issues. Hey, is this something that's just affecting this one client, or is this something that my entire client base is experiencing? The History tab is a great tool for helping identify those things. Finally, we have our Query Results tab. And really, the only time that you're going to be using this is when you get to the point where you are designing and creating your own internal monitors. Remember, these internal monitors, they're just SQL queries. So if you have a knowledge of SQL queries, you can build and create your own. And we've built inside of our internal monitors these abilities to kind of test those queries and make sure that they're going to work for you. So typically, what you're going to do is you're going to be on the Configuration tab here. You're going to finish building your query in the Additional Conditions area here. You're going to click on this Build and View Query button. And what's going to happen is, as you just saw, one of three things actually is going to occur. Hopefully what's going to happen is what we just saw, and that's that you're immediately going to go to this Query Results tab, and you're going to see some black text in this area I'm highlighting here. Okay, an immediate move over to the Query Results tab with all black text is the best potential outcome that you can get, because it means that not only is your query work, it's very efficient. Okay, now that does not necessarily mean it's going to produce a result. Okay. But it does mean that the query itself is not broken. It's a functional query, and that it's an efficient query. It's not taxing the database to do this. Now, conversely, you may have two other potential reactions when you click on the Build and View Query button. You may get a delay before you land on this Query Results tab. That delay could be anywhere from a second or two to a good couple of seconds, a good 10, 20 seconds. Maybe longer. And that indicates that you may or may not see some red text in this top area here, but that indicates that the efficiency of the query is very poor. It's not an efficient query at all. It's taking way too much for the database to parse this information and get it back to you. And that's a problem for Automate, because there's a potential there for a timeout of the query. And if that happens to an internal monitor, it's going to disable that internal monitor. So it's very important that you have efficient queries when you're building these. And this is a tool that can help you evaluate whether that's the case or not. So if you have too long of a delay when you click on that Build and View Query button before you land on this Query Results tab, maybe go back and review your query. See if there's a more efficient way to accomplish what it is you're trying to accomplish. The third and final result that you can get is immediately landing on the Query Results tab, but in this top area here, you have some red text. As is typically the case, red is bad. Red means that you have a faulty query. You have a bad query. Now, the nice part about this utility and built-in feature is that the red text is showing you where your problem is. So you're going to be able to come back to the configuration tab. You're going to be able to look in that area that was highlighted in red text on that query results tab and look there to see maybe I have an extra period, maybe I have an extra space. I'm notorious for that one. Whatever it may be, there's some 99% of the time there's going to be some sort of syntax error that's preventing it from running. You just want to go through the query and kind of make sure that all your ducks are in a row there. Well, that's internal monitors. Okay, and we kind of saw throughout all of this how those internal monitors are enabled on our groups, and we can set alert templates on them to accomplish different actions based on group membership. Remote monitors are also applied on the group level, but they can also be applied on the individual agent level. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to my Windows service plan here, and we're going to take a look at remote monitors where we can see we have a bunch of these enabled. I'm going to minimize that for right now, though, because we are going to actually start out on the computer management screen of this server here. Now, I'm going to right-click in my automation workspace. I'm going to come down and choose monitors. I kind of wish that they would actually rename that to remote monitors, because that's all that it is that we're looking at here. Okay, we are not looking at anything other than the remote monitors that are installed on this endpoint. Remember, these remote monitors, they're like little tiny apps that get installed on your endpoints. Okay? And they have a reverse logic from those internal monitors. Those internal monitors, they're looking for a failure state, and they're looking for that information against the database. These remote monitors, they're not looking at the database at all. They don't care about it. They're as close to real time as Automate gets. And really what they're doing is they're just residing on the endpoint, and they're reporting back that information based on all kinds of different algorithms. And essentially, they work with an opposite logic. They're saying, look, instead of looking for a failure state, I have a successful state or range that I like to stay in. And if I get outside of that, that's when I'm going to call my alert template. Now, inside the computer management screen here, I can, when I right-click and go to the monitors area, I can create an individual remote monitor on this endpoint right here. This is just a blank template for me to create whatever it is that I want to create. It may be more convenient to use the wizard. I like this method myself. Okay, and it's pretty obvious. It's subject-driven. We're actually going to go through creating a remote monitor when we go back and review our groups. We're not going to bother with that right now. We will see how that works in here in just a minute. But I want to show you that wizard because it is, in fact, the same wizard that we're going to see on the group level as well. But if I double-click on this particular remote monitor, I'm going to land on the status tab, and you can see that it's got some of the same tabs that I had for my internal monitor, but already you can tell that there's kind of a bit of a difference here, right? Now, if I hit F5 on my keyboard, I'm going to get a refresh of data, and we should see these values change here. See that? Kind of jumped up, number of seconds, up to 42 there. This is what I mean by as close to real time as we're able to get. Okay, so when you see this return information, that is the most recent run of the monitor, and that's the result that it got. Okay, but what's really important on these status tabs comes from right here, group created monitor. Okay, and you can see that there's an override settings. We'll talk about that in a moment. This is important because when these are group created monitors, the group controls the configuration. Let's go back to our service plan to see what that means. Well, here I have a number of monitors on my service plan, and if I highlight them, I have the ability to configure these on this group level. In other words, what's going to happen for this monitor is if I try on this endpoint to go and change its configuration, it's going to get overwritten by this service plan group. Okay, that customization is going to get wiped out. Okay, this is telling me what group it is that's controlling that group created monitor. It's telling me a very important piece of information. What group is it that I received this monitor from and that is controlling its configuration? So if I want to go out to that group and change that, I certainly can. But what if I only want to change it for this one endpoint? What if I don't want to reinvent the wheel for everything in this group? I just want this one system to be the exception. Well, I'm going to use my override settings checkbox. At the pop-up, I'm going to say to disable group sync, yes. And at that point, this becomes an isolated version of this monitor. I can then go to the configuration and alerting tabs, make whatever changes I want, and save those changes. And at this point, this monitor is now going to keep those changes and ignore what it got from the group, but it's not going to forget where it got it from. And that's really important. If I ever want to have it revert to using the settings from the group, I would come over here, I would remove the check from override settings, and I would say enable group sync. And as it suggests, that means that the next sync that occurs is going to pull that down and pull that configuration for the monitor from the group and reapply it on the endpoint. On my location tab is where I'm going to have my monitor name. And again, we're following that same naming convention. And we can see the client location and specific agent here. And I also have the alert target area. I can hit that. We're talking about the local computer here, but I have other options, automatic network device. That may be useful for something like a ping monitor or something along those lines. The alerting tab, pretty familiar stuff in here. There's our alert template. We have the edit alert and create new alert buttons. And this is, again, it's a global setting. Okay, if I hit this drop down, I should see my demo in there. There it is. Subject on success and failure, it's the same mechanism here. We use by default send fail after success for our remote monitors. Okay, so I would highly recommend that you leave those blank. And the rest of these we've already kind of talked about, right? The only real difference is this alert style. And this is a drop down. If I hit that, I've got a number of different options here. What this means is how many consecutive failures do I have to get before I'm going to trigger and call my alert template? That's what your alert style is. So in other words, the monitor runs. It detects a failed state. The next time it runs at its next interval, it detects a failed state again. Well, in my instance third here, it's going to run again in the next instance. It detects a success. It's not going to trigger. It's going to go back and reset that count. I have to have that many consecutive failures before the monitor. The next time the monitor checks after that, if I'm still in a failed state, it's going to call the alert template. The interval is going to tie directly into that alert style, because this is how often the monitor is going to run. It's an interval in seconds for how long in between runs of the monitor. Some quick math for you. 300 seconds is about 5 minutes. So this monitor is going to run every 5 minutes. Maybe I need to adjust that and set it up to 600. But remember, if I want to do that, if I want to do that just for this monitor, I have to override those settings on the status tab. I have my monitor type drop down, and if I hit that, in this instance, we're specifying a file directory check, but notice that I have a ping check. I just talked about a ping monitor a moment ago. Well, if I choose that monitor type, now all of a sudden my monitor options have changed. I have to specify an IP address. Maybe I want to go and do a service check. Now I have to name the service. Maybe I want to do an external EXE check. Now I have all of these different fields that I have to fill in for that type of check. Okay, each one of these is going to provide you with different options that you need to be looking for. And then you're going to be looking for your result type, your variables to use, your expressions, your conditions. And you want to remember with conditions and results, you're the opposite logic of those internal monitors. You're looking for a successful state or range to stay within. So if I was using less than with an internal monitor, I would probably use greater than with a remote monitor. The history tab is the same thing as it was on the internal monitors. This is just a great place to come if you're looking for identifying trending issues and for the same reasons. Now, the data collector tab, that's used pretty heavily by our management packs. Our management packs are some remote monitors that are tied to server roles. Basically what they do is they'll, part of their process is that they will populate these little graph bars here. I don't see folks use that an awful lot, but it's there for you if you want to. And then you have this trending tab, and that's used to apply a technique that we call exponential smoothing. And it's a powerful tool that can be used to reduce false positives, but it's most definitely not an exact science. If you want to play around with this, it may take a little bit of time to see if you're going to get a result, but it's never really going to truly eliminate ticket noise entirely. So those are all the things that I can do on an individual monitor for an individual endpoint. But what if I need to adjust these on the group level? We're going to go back to our service plan one last time. And inside of my service plan, again, I have these pre-configured remote monitors. And what this means is that any endpoint that is a member of this group is going to have these remote monitors installed upon them. But I'm going to control the configuration of those remote monitors from this group, okay, by simply opening the group's properties window, coming to computers, and then down to the remote monitors subtab. I'm going to highlight it. I have the ability to come over here, adjust my alert style, my alert templates. If I click on details, I can respecify my interval, my result, my check conditions. If I want to create a new one, I talked about that earlier, I'm going to have to clear here if I have anything highlighted. Notice that it went from update to add. That now means if I click the add button, I'm going to get that exact same monitor wizard that I saw on the individual agent level. If I wanted to, I can come in here and I can create a monitor that will get applied to every single endpoint that's a member of this group. Let's do that. We're going to create an event log monitor here. I want to look at my system logs for errors. I'm happy with the rest of these selections. I'm going to hit next. I don't need to specify what group I'm running it on because I've already made that choice by running this wizard from this group. I can come back and adjust the alert style later, but I'm going to default to once there. I'm going to be able to set my alert template. Maybe I want to go ahead and have it create an automate ticket for me. And maybe I want to specify my ticket category as I'm integrated with ConnectWise Manage, and I have these event log tickets that are mapped to a specific service board and manage. I'm happy with my report category. I'm going to click next. Noting that I'm going to use send fail after success, I'm going to leave these subjects on success and failure blank so that I get the automatic ticket close as well as a clue as to what the issue may be. I review the summary of the ticket and click finish, and that monitor is now installed on this group and will push down to all of the endpoints that are members of this group. And that is all the content that we have for you today. The next session we have will be on automation, where we will see the use of groups, extra data fields, searches, and scripts to execute a specific scenario and automate. We've seen that today with our onboarding process, but what we're going to see in the automation session is going to be a different use case scenario utilizing those same 4 pieces of functionality. Thank you for your time.